so much, Dr. Mazaris, for that stimulating discussion, and it got me thinking of many other applications and things we need to look at our own university. Now it gives me the pleasure to introduce to you one of our own, Dr. Reinhard Huetter, Ordinary Professor of Fundamental Theology here at our School of Theology and Religious Studies. Professor Huetter is a native of Lichtenfeld, Germany, received his Doctor of Theology and his Habilitationsschrift from the University of Erlangen, taught for 9 years theological ethics and systematic theology at the Lutheran School of Theology in Chicago, and then 17 years he taught systematic theology at Duke University Divinity School, until joining us here at the Catholic University of America. And it's also interesting to note that he entered the church in 2004. Of his many publications dealing with Aquinas, it is perhaps his latest book that is of most interest to our audience today, John Henry Newman on Truth and Its Counterfeits. And I trust that we'll get a little bit of an insight into some of his thoughts that will be in that book, in his talk entitled The University and Its Counterfeit, Newman's Litmus Test. Welcome.
Thank you all for coming out this late afternoon for this event. Newman is smiling on this event. There is university faculty from all disciplines. There are friars, there are religious priests. I see colleagues from a variety of fields. This is wonderful. Catholic University Press is there, the university's press is present. So you would think, okay, we have an embodiment, but at least the administration is present. So we are picking up now in my talk where Andrew left off. There will be a bit of an overlap, like in a good university setting, you get a positive redundancy, certain points are reinforced. And then I carry the discussion further into the contemporary setting, the setting in which Catholic universities find themselves in the late modern world. And in that context, Newman's idea of a university works very much as a litmus test. I took chemistry classes way back, and this is something I remember from them. So, it's about as far as it goes. So let's start out with a Newman quote. The true and adequate end of intellectual training and of a university is not learning or acquirement, but rather is thought or reason exercised upon knowledge. Unquote. Here you have, in a nutshell, the thesis at the very heart of Newman's vision of the university. The telos of the university, in the proper sense of the term, is not simply acquiring knowledge or some instruction, but rather is thought or reason exercised upon knowledge. And this latter, thought or reason exercised upon knowledge, is the cultivation of the mind, which is a good in itself. I invite you in the following 40 minutes to consider together with me John Henry Newman's idea of a university, still a must-read, I think, for every serious university student, as a potent litmus test for contemporary universities, first and foremost for Catholic universities. The litmus test Newman provides in his classic work lays bare the very crisis of the modern university and identifies what is in one way the cause and in another way the effect of this crisis, namely the rapid emergence and rise of the university's counterfeit. This counterfeit, as will become clear, is nothing but the late modern mutation of the university into a polytechnicum with a liberal arts appendix. Newman's litmus test is based on a normative idea of what a university essentially is. University is not simply a label that one can attach to whatever institution in which knowledge is acquired by way of research and conveyed by ways of teaching. Rather, university denotes the essential features of an institution of higher learning and its core curriculum that is characterized by fundamental metaphysical and epistemological commitments across centuries and across cultures. To put it in a nutshell, according to Newman, a university, properly conceived, is founded on the unity of all truth. The unity of truth in turn accounts for the unity of knowledge, and the unity of knowledge accounts for the unity of a university education. The discipline that inquires into the interrelationship of all sciences and hence into the unity of truth, Newman calls the science of sciences, or first science. The purpose of this first science is inquiring into and finding truth, comprehensive and ultimate truth. The science of sciences constitutes the keystone of the art of sciences, accounts for and advances the unity of knowledge, and thereby facilitates the inner coherence of a university education. This first science is the unique characteristic of a university in the proper sense. Infused into any field of study, its comparative, analytic, and synthetic activity of reflection connects each field with all other fields of study and research. The acme of this first science is natural theology, the inquiry into the source and perfection of all truth. The science of sciences and the reflexivity, integrative knowledge, and critical awareness it fosters is intrinsically useless, and therefore resists all the typical modern strategies of instrumentalizing even philosophical knowledge. It is the most liberal of all liberal arts that carry their ends in their very exercise. There are, however, two apparently irreversible facts that seem to render Newman's idea of a university with the first science at its very heart distinctly antiquated and passé. First, the research and knowledge production of the late modern research university is a thoroughly secular affair. As noted historian Brad Gregory from the University of Notre Dame aptly put it, quote, "Regardless of the academic discipline, knowledge in the Western world today is considered secular by definition. Its assumptions, methods, content, and truth claims are and can only be secular, framed not only by the logical demand of rational coherence, but also by the methodological postulate of naturalism and its epistemological correlate, evidentiary empiricism." Unquote. Taking the methodological postulate of naturalism and its epistemological correlate, evidentiary empiricism, as not only given but as normative, most contemporary natural scientists will dismiss the kind of inquiry characteristic of this first science as a meaningless form of pseudoscience, something akin to parapsychology or Freudian analysis. The second fact is this: the kind of knowledge privileged and praised in the late modern research university is knowledge that facilitates all forms of making, of techne. It is the kind of knowledge that is essentially extrinsic to the ends that are to be achieved. It is technological know-how in the service of expanding control over natural processes or over the artificial reproduction of such processes. The very ends this highly advanced know-how serves are, however, almost never subject matters that would be investigated and taught at the very core and center of these research universities. Subject matters like happiness, justice, virtue, and the end-of-tellers of human life and of the cosmos. The American Association of Universities, the exclusive club of the leading research universities in the United States of America, characterizes a research university as an institution that advances a great variety of expertise to be applied to real-world problems. Cutting-edge research is combined with undergraduate training for such research, often in highly specialized programs. This research university could be called the Baconian Polytechnicum, named after its spiritus rector Francis Bacon. The late modern research university is the Baconian Polytechnicum in its most advanced stage. It has had a stunning global career, so that as Brett Gregory rightly observes, quote, leading scientists and scholars at research universities are the societal and indeed the global arbiters of what counts as knowledge and what does not in the early 21st century, unquote. If this state of affairs is an evident fact and amounts to a global success, why should we be held captive by the nostalgic image of a university education long gone, if it ever existed, and even if advanced by a brilliant intellectual like Newman? Should we not simply own up to the fact that the university has irreversibly morphed into a polytechnical, beautified with a veneer of a liberal arts propedeutic, the instrumentalized fragments of a liberal arts curriculum, in short, has morphed irreversibly into its counterfeit? Yet Newman's litmus test cannot be dismissed so easily. Despite the current trend of a comprehensive instrumentalization of university education, one may observe a widespread hope still alive in many institutions of higher learning. The hope is that the brand name university might allow those institutions that aspire to advance themselves from colleges to universities, as well as research universities that are loath to call themselves a polytechnicum, Harvard Polytechnicum, Yale Polytechnicum, somehow doesn't quite do it, they don't like it. So, there's a hope to retain at least some continuity with the normative ideal that the term university entails. The hope is that a generally accepted academic gold standard might provide at least some shared intellectual and moral standards that might help protect these institutions at least somewhat from their total instrumentalization and commodification. Yet in order to generally retain continuity with the normative ideal of the university, these institutions have to expose themselves to Newman's litmus test, a test that might show that they are in the very process of turning into, or have already turned into, the university's counterfeit, the Baconian Polytechnicum. The litmus test points out that any current university that wishes to retain continuity with the normative ideal of the university must retain or retrieve the features proper to the university qua university. Newman shows that to retain or retrieve these features means nothing less than to challenge and overcome the programmatic ideological naturalism as the prescribed intellectual scope and evidentiary empiricism as the only acknowledged form to gain real scientific knowledge, ensure to dismantle what Charles Taylor calls the immanent frame, a normative frame that expects all putatively scientific knowledge to be computational, that is quantifiable and applicable in such a way that its success can be measured. At the center of Newman's normative litmus test stands the argument that the very heart of the university is the first science, and that the very heart of this first science has to be theology, that is, natural philosophy or philosophical theology. Here is Newman's utterly countercultural and foremost counterintuitive claim. Natural or philosophical theology is indispensable for the integrity of the university precisely as university for this reason. Liberal education carries its end in itself. liberal education is a potentially universal education. While it is impossible to embrace all or even most fields of contemporary knowledge, liberal education fosters reflection upon one's knowledge in relation to other fields and in relation to the whole. This interrelatedness makes liberal education a potentially universal education. Such universal education requires a horizon of absolute, radical, and non-reductive transcendence, a horizon that affords a maximum of possible expansiveness, interconnectedness, and coherence. But such a horizon of transcendence can only be achieved and secured if the first science, with natural theology, is its eggman, is an integral part of a university education. According to Newman, the greatest danger to the inner coherence of the university is a self-imposed normative naturalism. Such a normative naturalism dramatically reduces the horizon of truth and thereby undermines the inner unity of knowledge. Newman states, quote, "Admit a God, and you introduce among the subjects of your knowledge a fact encompassing, closing in upon, absorbing every other fact conceivable. How can we investigate any part of any order of knowledge and stop short of that which enters into every order? All true principles run over with it. All phenomena converge to it. It is truly the first and the last. Granting that divine truth differs in kind from human, so do human truths differ in kind from one another. If the knowledge of the Creator is in a different order from knowledge of the creature, so in like manner, metaphysical science is in a different order from physical, physics from history, history from ethics. You will soon break up into fragments the whole circle of secular knowledge if you begin the mutilation with the divine." This is from the second discourse of the idea of the university. Normative naturalism is ultimately nothing but the university's undertaker. Newman makes good on this claim in a three-step argument. First, Newman establishes the fundamental relationship between objective truth and scientific inquiry. He does so by insisting upon a version of epistemological realism that still informs much of contemporary natural science. Quote, "Truth is the object of knowledge of whatever kind. And when we inquire what is meant by truth, I suppose it is right to answer that truth means facts and their relations. All that exists, as contemplated by the human mind, forms one large system, one complex fact. Viewed all together, the sciences approximate to a representation or subjective reflection of the objective truth as nearly as possible to the human mind." Unquote. Subject matter of the first sciences, Eichmann, natural theology, God, allows the understanding of the rest of reality as a created whole, as a universe, and consequently all knowledge that can be gained as essentially interrelated and therefore as an integral component of universal knowledge. In a second step now, Newman develops the first part of an analogy that in an uncanny way anticipates powerful current initiatives in contemporary research universities, namely to recast the curriculum in light of a normative evolutionary naturalism. Visit Harvard or MIT and some other places. Reason, volition, freedom, and mind must be studied as at best aspects of the phenomenon of consciousness that emerges from or is a mere epiphenomenon to physical or biochemical processes, in light of which they must ultimately be accountable and possibly predictable. History, political science, economics, literature and language, art history, musical theory, and last but not least, philosophy, with the exception of logical positivism, formal logic, and the philosophy of mathematics and of the natural sciences, can happily be eliminated from the university curriculum. Replace now the physical and mechanistic framework in Newman's illustration with a biological evolutionary one, and matters sound only all too familiar. In the third step of his argument, Newman completes his analogy and draws a startling conclusion. While not falsifying the definitions, principles, and laws operative in such a normative naturalistic university curriculum, ignoring the reality of human reason and volition as proper motive causes, a professor holding, Newman would argue, such normatively naturalistic views might still convey a radically false view of the way things actually are. If this is true about human reason and volition, a fortiori, then the ignoring and consequent dismissal from university subjects of a reality infinitely superior to human reason and volition as motive causes would have much graver distorting consequences. And so Newman drives home the blade of his argument, quote, verse incomparably, for the idea of God, if there be a God, is infinitely higher than the idea of man, if there be man. If to blot out man's agency is to deface the book of knowledge on the supposition of that agency existing, what must it be, supposing it exists, to blot out the agency of God? If the creature is ever setting in motion an endless series of physical causes and effects, much more is the Creator. And as our excluding volition from our range of ideas is a denial of the soul, so our ignoring divine agency is a virtual denial of God. Moreover, supposing man can will and act by himself in spite of physics, to shut up this great truth, though one, is to put our whole encyclopedia of knowledge out of joint. And supposing God can will and act of himself in the world which he has made, and we deny or slur it over, then we are throwing the circle of universal science into a like, or far worse, confusion. Unquote. On the supposition that God exists, the exclusion of this all-important fact from the circle of universal science can only result in the omission and distortion of truth. The supposition that God does not exist is a philosophical tenet that cannot be proven conclusively, and hence can neither constitute a first principle nor a conclusion of any of the academic disciplines that belong to the secular university circle of sciences. Ideological atheism is as unphilosophical as it is unscientific. How would Newman's argument fare in the present secular research university? It would hardly find a serious hearing. The argument, nevertheless, still has considerable heuristic value as a litmus test, even in settings in which evolutionary naturalism has achieved the status of an unquestionable dogma. For Newman's litmus test helps us understand why the academic disciplines of the contemporary secular universities are roughly but discernibly divided along the lines of the Kantian antinomy between determinism and freedom. The defenders of determinism are by and large at home in the hard sciences, the defenders of freedom in the humanities. The defenders of determinism are typically, though with noteworthy exceptions, embracing a post-humanist outlook, especially in the biosciences. They regard the human being as a highly developed animal bent on maximizing the success of its species, of which the natural sciences and their technical application are currently the most decisive factor. The most articulate defenders of a radical notion of human freedom are increasingly, though with noteworthy exceptions, embracing a transhumanist outlook. They epitomize freedom in a new existentialist sense, the freedom of design, that is, the freedom of enhancing or simply changing properties of one's own nature, intelligence, gender, emotions, body features, etc., with the existence of biotechnology. Thus, human beings become their own designer choices, or worse, the result of designer choices made by others, parents, governments, lawmakers, silent majorities, who have gained the political power and legal legitimization to do so. And so the extremes meet, for transhumanism is nothing but the most consistent instantiation of posthumanism, especially when the design will eventually be socially and politically enforced and collectively applied. Welcomed at first as a liberation from the contingency, corruptibility, and fallibility of human nature, as an exercise of radical Promethean freedom, and thus as the final flowering of the Enlightenment project, eugenic bioengineering will eventually result in a radical subjugation of human nature to techne, to willful production. Even Jürgen Habermas understood that. Friedrich Nietzsche, in his very late notebooks, seems to have anticipated both the post-humanist and the transhumanist implications of a purely secular utilitarian knowledge production. Because this passage from Nietzsche's notebook is quite forceful in its undiluted consistency, I shall give it in full length. Quote, Nietzsche now, not Newman. There exists neither spirit nor reason, nor thinking nor consciousness, nor soul nor will nor truth. All are fictions that are of no use. There is no question of the subject and the object, but of a particular species of animal that can prosper only through a certain relative rightness. Above all, regularity of its perceptions, so that it can accumulate experience. Knowledge works as a tool of power, hence it is plain that it increases with every increase of power. The meaning of knowledge, here as in the case of good or beautiful, the concept is to be regarded in a strict and narrow anthropocentric and biological sense. In order for a particular species to maintain itself and increase its power, its conception of reality must comprehend enough of the calculable and constant for it to base a scheme of behavior on it. The utility of preservation, not some abstract theoretical need to be deceived, stands as the motive behind the development of the organs of knowledge. Organs of knowledge develop in such a way that their observations suffice for our preservation. In other words, the measure of the desire for knowledge depends upon the measure to which the will to power grows in a species. A species grasps a certain amount of reality in order to become master of it, in order to press it into service. Unquote. If Nietzsche is right, the university as a humanist enterprise of education and universal knowledge is quite passé. What Nietzsche predicts is the species-relevant polytechnical. Quote, a species grasps a certain amount of reality in order to become master of it, in order to press it into service, unquote. This is the post-humanist program. And when we include human nature itself into the reality to be mastered, we have the transhumanist program. Consequently, Newman's litmus test has lost nothing of its relevance. Rather, with uncanny prescience and precision, Newman perceived the radical implications hidden in the Baconian polytechnical that Nietzsche eventually would lay bare. While we are busy ushering Newman, the all too uncomfortable Catholic intellectual, out the front door of our late modern research universities, assuring him in the most cordial terms of the indubitable humanistic value of the idea of a university, which presently is most regrettably utterly unfeasible, Francis Bacon, a long-time university tenant, quietly opens the back door and beckons Friedrich Nietzsche to enter in. Newman's litmus test suggests a fundamental either-or. Either the university is nothing but a species-relevant polytechnical, be it as the tool of mastering nature by pressing it more and more into the service of the human species, or be it as the launching pad for mastering human nature itself, the technical and genetic optimization of the human being into some cyborg, super or transhumanity. Or The university and its education presupposes the possibility of universal knowledge and aspires to universal education as an end in itself, as a contribution to a more perfect form of existence. In this latter case, the knowledge that the first science yields, culminating in theological knowledge, unavoidably bears upon all other knowledge. Newman's litmus test links the question of the nature of the university and of a corresponding proper university education to the question of the nature and end of the human being, to the question of the nature of human flourishing, and to the ways of realizing a more perfect form of human existence. Intellectual cultivation of the intellect. There's only one kind of university that can meaningfully inquire into these questions of a fundamentally philosophical and theological nature and regard them as integral to university education itself. It is Newman's university. The Baconian counterfeit, in its most advanced state, what I would sometimes call the Polytechnic Utiliversity, will brush questions of this kind aside as unscientific, for an inquiry guided by such philosophical questions does not contribute to any tangible, that is measurable, knowledge-making. Such an answer will of course convict the late modern research university only of its tacit Baconian ideological commitments. Newman would regard such a university as decapitated, as unable to reflect philosophically upon the ideology that drives its judgments and its operations. In short, as the university's counterfeit. If Newman is indeed right, the university disciplines resemble an ark. Its keystone stabilizes the whole edifice. Remove it, and the ark collapses. All stones are still there in their distinct integrity, but now lie in an indistinct heap. On the undergraduate level, the current secular multiversity, absent the keystone, resembles such a heap, an ever-growing heap indeed. While each stone has its integrity, the relationship between all of them is utterly unclear, excepting, of course, subcoherences between mathematics and the natural sciences and among the natural sciences. In this situation of a curricular and disciplinary heterogeneity and even confusion, several disciplines are advancing themselves as keystones or as a multidisciplinary keystone configuration for the construction of a new ark. The strongest contender for such a multidisciplinary keystone configuration is presently an evolutionary naturalism. An emerging new keystone configuration stretches from astrophysics via biochemistry to neuroscience, extends itself into the ruins of the humanities, and even affords its own neo-positivist philosophy of science. With this new keystone configuration, the size of the ark changes considerably. For it is paradigmatic for the ideological naturalism funding this new Ordo Scientiarum to suppose that the first science, the first philosophy, has died and has been replaced by the natural sciences. With the death of the first science, many of the stones of the former ark can no longer be integrated into this new neo-positivist order, and the ones that are still to be integrated have to change their form in order to accommodate to the reduced scope imposed by evolutionary naturalism. Such a naturalist reconstitution of the remaining university disciplines for the sake of the new unity of knowledge, purportedly to be achieved by evolutionary naturalism, would undoubtedly affect most deeply whatever remains of the humanities, but would leave deep traces also in the other remaining disciplines. In short, the ideological imposition of evolutionary naturalism would force the liberal arts to accommodate themselves in the proverbial Procrustean bed of the Baconian university, to shrink into the prescribed form, that means to accept their thorough instrumentalization, or to be cut off. And that would not be the end of the trouble. Rather, the new naturalist structure of the art of university disciplines would be haunted by the specter of Nietzsche. For philosophical naturalism remains inherently vulnerable to the destructive acids of genealogical skepticism. Despite the realist intuitions at work in the natural sciences, the superimposed philosophical naturalism invites its own genealogical deconstruction. Among tool-making and tool-using animals of the species Homo sapiens, truth is nothing but a cover for domination, or more radically and naturalistically conceived, the will to power is the only truth there is. Consequently, as Hobbes already understood, Homo homini lupus, the human is a wolf to his or her fellow humans. There's nothing more threatening than another's truth imposed upon us in order to subdue or crush our will of self-assertion. Such a genealogical deconstruction of the reigning philosophical naturalism would, of course, issue in the very termination of the university in any, even the remotest and most equivocal sense. Being historically oblivious, the contenders of philosophical naturalism are only all too forgetful of an all-important fact. The specter of Nietzsche has arisen with and in response to the ascendancy of modern philosophical naturalism and will erode it from the inside out until it will collapse or until it will simply be abandoned as just another false image that held us captive for all too long. In the meanwhile, however, as the novus ordo of a consistently naturalist research university is emerging, an historically unself-conscious but ideologically self-confident ideological naturalism will increasingly define the scope and consistency of a new art of university disciplines. In this novus ordo scientiarum, the knowledge-making of the tool-using animal Homo sapiens will turn out to be nothing but a most advanced form of tool-making and tool-using. And consequently, in light of the newly imposed horizon of naturalism, the most advanced university training will be nothing but a training in the servile arts, in a highly advanced tool knowledge of a technical or managerial sort, in order to fix those kinds of problems that can be fixed with the help of tools. If nothing else, Newman's litmus test serves at least as a provocative reminder that the only thing that can save the university from the reductive and in the end detrimental distortions of philosophical naturalism and from its Nietzschean genealogical deconstruction is indeed the discipline that allows for the widest possible scope of truth. Only with the science of sciences, the first science as the keystone of the art of university disciplines, will that art achieve the widest possible scope? Will the university remain open to a maximum of interrelated and complementary sciences? Will a university education remain in all areas of knowledge essentially philosophical? And will university knowledge as an end in and of itself be intelligible and desirable? For contrary to Nietzsche, human beings desire to know, not because they desire to master, but because knowledge is the proper perfection of the human intellect, which is a more perfect form of existence. It is precisely the reflective, integrating, and critical contemplation of the whole in its interrelated parts and of its first cause that characterizes the very center of the education envisioned in Newman's idea of the university. The intrinsic worth of this contemplation is most vehemently denounced and most desperately needed in our late modern techno-capitalist societies. Yet it is precisely by exercising this reflective, integrating, and critically differentiating contemplation of the whole in its interrelated parts that the habitus of wisdom, sagacity, can be formed. The path to sagacity is contemplation, that is, thought exercised upon knowledge. And the place where one can undertake the intellectual practices that lead to the cultivation of the mind and to the acquisition of the virtue of wisdom is the university conceived of according to its proper essence. Newman states, and this is in Discourse 6, quote, "The perfection of the intellect, which is the result of education and its beau ideal, is to be imparted to individuals in their respective measures, is the clear, calm, accurate vision and comprehension of all things, as far as the finite mind can embrace them, each in its place, and with its own characteristics applied. It is almost prophetic from its knowledge of history. It is almost heart-searching from its knowledge of human nature. It has almost supernatural charity from its freedom from littleness and prejudice. It has almost the repose of faith, because nothing can startle it. It has almost the beauty and harmony of heavenly contemplation. So intimate is it with the eternal order of things and the music of the spheres." Unquote. This is the sagacity that sits at the very heart of Newman's vision of the university. Sagacity denotes the perfection of the cultivation of the mind, and this is a proper end in itself. Yet Newman was too much of a theologian in order to forget that wisdom can only reach its fullest flowering when it is supplemented by the pursuit of sanctity. And he knew that the university, qua university, was utterly impotent to heal and transform the human heart and the human will. And now bear with me as I'm quoting Newman at length from one of the most famous passages of his idea of a university. "I consider knowledge to have its end in itself. For all its friends, or its enemies may say, I insist upon it, that it is as real a mistake to burden it with virtue or religion as with the mechanical arts. Its direct business is not to steel the soul against temptation or to console it in affliction, any more than to set the loom in motion or to direct the steam carriage. Yet ever so much the means or the condition of both material and moral advancement is still taken by and in itself. It as little mends our hearts as it improves our temporal circumstances. Knowledge is one thing, virtue is another. Good sense is not conscience, refinement is not humility, or its largeness and justness of view of faith. Philosophy, however enlightened, however profound, gives no command over the passions, no influential motives, no vivifying principles. Liberal education makes not the Christian, not the Catholic, but the gentleman. It is well to be a gentleman. It is well to have a cultivated intellect, a delicate taste, a candid, equitable, dispassionate mind, a noble and courteous bearing in the conduct of life. These are the connatural qualities of a large knowledge. They are the objects of a university. I am advocating, I shall illustrate and insist upon them, but still I repeat, they are no guarantee for sanctity or even for conscientiousness. They may attach to the man of the world, to the profligate, to the heartless, pleasant alas, and attractive as he shows when decked out in them. Taken by themselves, they do not seem to be what they are not. They look like virtue at a distance, but they are detected by close observers, and on the long run, and hence it is that they are popularly accused of pretense and hypocrisy. Not, I repeat, from their own fault, but because their professors and their admirers persist in taking them for what they are not, and are officious in arrogating for them a praise to which they have no claim. Quarry the granite rock with razors, or moor the vessel with a thread of silk. Then may you hope with such keen and delicate instruments as human knowledge and human reason to contend against those giants, the passion and the pride of man. Unquote. Sagacity without sanctity stands in grave danger of turning cold, presumptuous, proud, and self-conceited. Yet how can sanctity be pursued in an institution whose sole purpose is the acquisition of sagacity? The healing and the transformation of the human heart is the precondition for the pursuit of sanctity, and the former can only be achieved through the healing and sanctifying grace. All of this is known and received by way of the Catholic faith. Yet as Newman rightly states, quote, "If the Catholic faith is true, a university cannot exist externally to the Catholic pale, for it cannot teach universal knowledge if it does not teach Catholic theology." I had to reach that point, unquote. Yet this is not quite enough. And this is a crucial point to understand Newman's idea of a university. Sanctity is not achieved simply by a university being Catholic and Orthodox in some shape or form. This is necessary, of course, but far from sufficient to secure the pursuit of sanctity. Because this point is often overlooked and forgotten, I shall quote Newman one more last time here, and then we have reached the end. I say then that even though the case could be so that the whole system of Catholicism was recognized and professed without the direct presence of the Church, still this would not at once make such a university a Catholic institution, nor be sufficient to secure the due weight of religious consideration in its philosophical studies. For it may easily happen that a particular bias or drift may characterize an institution, which no rules can reach, no officers remedy, no professions or promises counteract. Considered materially, some of the institutions that he's referring to were Catholic, but not formally. What is it that secures the formal presence of Catholicism in the university? That is the Church. That is the Church alone. Only when the Church is formally present and thus penetrates the university with its liturgy, its sacraments, its preaching, its life of charity, the witness of the religious on campus, and most centrally, the role tutors in the intellectual as well as spiritual formation of students play, is the unity of the pursuit of sagacity and sanctity secured. According to Newman's vision, it would be a fatal mistake to separate campus ministry from the office of student life and to abolish the presence of colleges in the university with its central institution, the tutor. In a Catholic university, campus ministry would be the office of student life, and the office of tutor would be the bridge between the pedagogical and the pastoral, between the pursuit of sagacity and the pursuit of sanctity. And so we must conclude that Newman's litmus test does not only work in regard to the university's counterfeit, the late modern polytechnicum with a liberal arts appendix, the Utiliversity. The litmus test rather also pertains to any Catholic university. Here it tests whether and to which degree such a Catholic university facilitates and encourages the pursuit of sagacity as well as sanctity, the unity of wisdom and holiness, by way of the integration of its curriculum, its campus ministry and student life, and the central role tutors would play in the intellectual and spiritual formation of students. From whatever angle we look at it, Newman's idea of a university is a gift that keeps giving in rich ways, and a challenge that continues challenging in salutary ways. For sure, the university is counterfeit, the late modern Baconian polytechnical, but also every university, especially every Catholic university, that is committed to Newman's idea. I thank you for your attention.